players gave the team the best value per dollar in 2024. Exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Happy Memorial Day to those of you who are celebrating. And on this Memorial Day in 2025, we're going to remember some things from 2024. And the objective here is really rather simple, and it's where's value per dollar for the Dolphins in 2024? And how can you use that information to kind of plan accordingly for 2025? So this all starts with a project that I did, and it was for Touchdown Miami last year, and it was a weekly film study on offense and defense that came out of it. But I graded every player on every snap throughout the course of the season to give myself a full database of above or below expectation on a snap-by-snap basis. This started as this was the foundation of how way back in the day, not the out of 100 points grades that you see now, but back in the day, Pro Football Focus grading used to be done on a matter of every play was +2 to -2. The further above expectation you were, you got up to +2 points. The further below expectation you were, you got up to -2 points on every single play. And then you'd see these guys and the J.J. Watts of the world were like +160 for the course of a full season, right? And that was kind of the quantifying grades that were given out. Well, they've since adjusted it where they do that process, but then they convert it into a 100-point scale. And I wanted to just get the raw data. So I said, I'm going to do the throwback thing, and I'm going to grade the Dolphins film to the best of my ability, +2 to -2 for every snap, for every player on the field. And what it gave me was, and if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to get a chance to see it. If you don't watch this one on YouTube, you can pop in and check it out. But what it gave me is a full database, and you can't read the specifics here because that's not really the point. It's every player for every game, every snap that they have logged with a timestamp, the opponent, the quarter, the time, what I graded them on the play. So I could see all the personnel groupings, I could see the starting offensive line group, and it's the whole season, right? And the objective being, I want to be able to then filter and say, if I want to see every grade that I gave Malik Washington that was a plus grade for the season, I can isolate Malik Washington's. There's a pivot table that I have where I can then filter by the grade assignment that I gave out. It's the whole season for the entirety of the roster. Plus or minus scale, +2 to -2. And the data that it gave me was really rather interesting to see. It doesn't account for how limited what your scheme is, but it's within the confines of the play design. Are you meeting baseline threshold of the bare minimum of your job? And for some guys, that answer was yes. And for other guys, the answer was no. And then the no culprits are the names that you would expect. On the offensive side of the ball, both your offensive guards were the lowest performing players on the depth chart. On the defensive side of the ball, you had some really frustrating moments with Jordan Poyer, and David Long was catastrophically bad against Arizona, which was, of course, his last ride with the team. And then he was out of there. The edge group, once Phillips went down, until Chop Robinson came to life around week 8, week 9, that was a really tough-looking group. And you get role players like Quentin Bell who come in, and there's every once in a while a modestly above average expectation grade, but you're just rooting for zeros, right? Because the ceiling's not quite there as these guys that you're paying the dollars to. So for the first time this week, and it's inspired really by the Jalen Ramsey saga, I wanted to look and see relative to the dollars that in cash, not cap hits, but cash, where were the best performing players relative to their contract to this methodology? A guy like, I'll let the cat out of the bag, De'Von Achane. I think Devon can be a lot better moving forward. Devon himself said he could be a lot better with some of the runs that he left out on the field. But his contributions in the passing game, his ability to make people miss, his ability to create chunk plays, all of those things, he was one of the better scoring players on the Dolphins offense as a whole. And I think he can get a lot better. But playing as a second-year player on a rookie contract who received less than $1 million in compensation last year, that per dollar above expectation performance is a monster number. He was comfortably the best valued contract as far as performing above expectation of any Dolphins player on the roster last year. Any Dolphins player on the roster last year. That includes Calais Campbell, who was number 2. But Calais Campbell played for $3 million. So you play for $3 million, Devon played for less than a third of that. If Devon has similar, obviously if he has similar above expectation total performance for the season, it's going to be 3 times as valuable as a contract because he played for a third of the price. So that's where it gets really interesting when you get into, you got guys making 20, 21, 26, $43 million versus guys that maybe don't perform as high of a level, but are making literal fractions of the amount of money, if not 1/25th. A guy making $1 million made 126 what Tyreek Hill made last season. How do you value the weight of the contract versus the performance against expectation? We're going to get a little bit more into this concept and explore the good and the bad. And there's both. There's both, and you're gonna get some brain pain like Mama from Waterboy. Ow! You're gonna get it when we get to the bad. But we're gonna start with the good. Who were the players that performed good? But even the good has some context that I think you can look at and apply to the 2025 Dolphins. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. You ever look at your bank account and wonder, where did my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment at the touch of a finger, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over all of your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, your investments, and spending all in one place so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. You might be surprised when you start using Monarch just how much those 2-door delivery services are costing you on a monthly basis. So you can make changes and pivot accordingly. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to get a chance to see some of these numbers. And if you're listening, because this was just originally an audio platform, I got you covered. No worries. But let's dive a little bit into above and below expectation performers on a per dollar basis. De'Von Achane, Calais Campbell, Aaron Brewer, Jonnu Smith, Zach Sealer. Those were the top 5 performers on a cash value above expectation per snap basis on my film grading of the Dolphins season. Devon played for $997,157. Calais Campbell played for $3.025 million. Obviously, that's a departure the Dolphins will feel, but the Dolphins infused a bunch of cost-controlled players into that room with a lot of youth. So they have a succession plan there at the very least. Aaron Brewer has 2 years left on his 3-year, $21 million contract. I know that there's some Dolphins fans that want a bigger player in that spot, but I would argue that having bigger / better, not very bottom, like when I say very bottom of this list, I mean literally the very bottom of this list. type players on a per dollar basis when they weren't getting paid a lot of money. Brewer's strengths will continue to be apparent, and I think you will give him the help in some of those situational instances where maybe some of his shortcomings are a little bit less apparent. Jonnu Smith entering into a contract year in 2025. Zach Sealer has 2 years remaining on his deal, but you could make an argument, we did this show last week, that he's due for a renewed contract. Teron Armstead was 6th. He retires. Jordan Brooks, a free agent signing last year, signed for he got $10.5 million in cash last year. He's still the 7th highest performing player on a per snap above expectation basis, despite making $10+ million. He's the 2nd highest player on this list that made more than $10 million. It was Teron Armstead, played for $14.348. Then Jalen Waddle, Austin Jackson, Tyreek Hill, Alec Ingold, Jalen Wright on a rookie contract, but with limited opportunities. He thought he was really good in the first half of the year, then he kind of faded and you didn't see him. Jalen Ramsey, a little bit further down this list. And I have those 2 names, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey, in gold because they are names that are obviously under contract for 2025. Ramsey, there's a trade saga. Tyreek Hill, there was a fallout at the end of last year. Tyreek Hill's coming out on social media and talking about how we weren't in the lab like we needed to be last year. Whoops. But that's your 2nd and 3rd highest paid players on the team. And Tua Tagovailoa here as well, like we didn't get to, from a per snap basis, he outperformed a lot of the names that are in front of him. But when you're paid $43 million in cash, the conversation changes a little bit, right? So if I were to just look at the grade without the weight monetarily, it's Calais Campbell for guys that played meaningful snaps for you. It's Calais Campbell, Teron Armstead, Zach Sealer, Tua Tagovailoa, De'Von Achane, Jalen Waddle. I wouldn't put Mostert on this list because he didn't play like a significant amount of snaps. That's where Aaron Brewer comes in. And then you're into Ingold, Tyreek Hill, Austin Jackson, Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey, Chop Robinson on a rookie contract. So just the isolation of above expectation on a snap-by-snap basis, and this is not saying that everything was good. It's not in context of where the limitations of the scheme are. It's not in limitations of where a player can or can't access throws on the field. Because I know when we went into some of this stuff, people got real mad at the assertion that Tua was one of your top 5 performers above expectation because of the limitations that he has. It doesn't grade accounting for shortcomings in scheme. It's what are you asked to do on the play and how often do you execute above expectation to it? It's a very nuanced way to look at football, right? But when you put the weight on, and suddenly these guys are making 26.5, 26.1, 43.12, the weight of the dollars that you're being given pushes you further down this list, even if you're performing relatively equal to some of your peers on the roster or even outperforming them. But when a guy's making $997,000 and he's performing at the same level of above expectation for what he's asked to do than what you are, and you're making 26 or $43 million, that's where you see the quality on a per snap basis and where your surplus value exists. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these players with $4.5 million or $7 million, like Jonnu or Aaron Brewer or Zach, made $9.8 million last year. You stack a couple of those guys together, and it's to the cost of one Tyreek Hill or one Jalen Ramsey or potentially 5 Tua Tagovailoas. Now, this doesn't account for position value either. So having a lockdown corner or a starting quarterback is more important than having a F tight end who plays 600 snaps and positionally a center that you can kind of buoy because he's part of a group of 5 players. So this isn't a be-all, end-all. I don't want it to be interpreted as a be-all, end-all. But it is, from the scoring methodology, you're seeing where the best values in dollars spent are for the Dolphins. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're above expectation, you should be considered like a quality value to the team, because there's no shortage of names who are below expectation as well. And I want to spend enough time focused on this top of list for guys that were above expectation because when you see names like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey as guys who have long-term outlook questions with wanting to be here, or do they not want to be here, or they're pushing 30 years old, and you've got multiple years of big dollars that are left. I point out Jalen Ramsey because as good as Jalen Ramsey still is, the play relative to the dollar didn't crack the top 10 values that the Dolphins had last year. And I'm not saying that the Dolphins are going to be just fine without Jalen Ramsey either. But it kind of underscores why there's a willingness here to potentially go in a different direction. And one of the other neat things that I have the ability to do with this process is I can grade and then map the player grades throughout the course of the season. So the highest rated corner that the Dolphins had at the end of the season last year for each of their final 4 games was Kader Kohou. Kader Kohou outgraded Jalen Ramsey down the stretch. Now, Ramsey was cream of the crop pretty much through the first 2/3 of the season. But it is when you look at the trend and you look at the age and you look at the dollars, and I understand there's pressure to perform and there's pressure to win. But if I take an honest look at the grades and the trends and the dollars and the history of a position, I don't think it's necessarily a kiss of death individually when you assess that individual player and trajectory. And you can argue it's good business. Now, good business in the midst of other things that were bad business is how you as a team find yourself between a rock and a hard place, right? And the adjustment that was made to Jalen Ramsey's contract last August/September was bad business. There's no doubt about that because it put more guaranteed money on your plate, and it provided a pay raise for Jalen Ramsey, right? But I think it's an interesting way to look at it from a above expectation performance standpoint per dollars. You're already kind of reaching the tipping point where both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey, for what they were compensated as players that are older players for their respective positions when age walls come very rapidly, they are already like for what the dollars were given, you didn't get what you paid for any of them, for any of the top names that you had on the roster last year. So, what about the bottom of the list? And I think this is where you can underscore where this Dolphins roster got better. And obviously they're putting money and financials and premium resources into some of these spots. And there's a lot of names in some of these other spots as well. So we're going to get into the other side of the coin. Who are the worst values per dollar? And even the names that we spotlight now, they're above expectation performances for their relative roles within the schemes that the Dolphins were able to play last year. What about the other side of the coin? Who didn't deliver? We're going to spotlight them next here on Locked on Dolphins. So make sure you guys stick with us. This is going to get ugly, but we got to do it for congruency's sake, for having both sides of the coin. So without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to the least valuable contracts on a per snap above expectation performance. Obviously, Bradley Chubb received $20.45 million in cash last year, did not play a snap. It's not great. Miss a whole year for an injury in 23. It's obviously a bummer. Would have loved to have seen Bradley down the stretch. They set the table and have kind of re-geared and recalibrated. Neil Farrell, I think it's amazingly impressive that Neil Farrell played like 60 snaps last year, got like $25,000 in cash, and was the least valuable contract the Dolphins had. Jordan Poyer, of actual meaningful players that you had as far as like a snap volume standpoint. Jordan Poyer, least valuable contract on the roster. Liam Eichenberg, second least valuable contract on the roster. Robert Jones, third least valuable contract on the roster. Kader Kohou is on here, but with an asterisk. He played a ton of snaps, and he was not good in the first half of the year. If you grade him from a back half of season onward, it paints a very different picture. And you're sympathetic to Jordan Poyer, obviously long in the tooth veteran. You have a certain level of expectation. Eichenberg and Jones, they were bets that the team placed on having continuity within the scheme and understanding the scheme, and they coached around those guys, and they still couldn't meet to performance for guys that were making between $3 and $3.5 million in cash. It's tough. Anthony Walker, Storm Duck, Jackson Carman, Tyler Huntley, Durham Smythe, Emmanuel Agba, David Long, kind of your marquee names here from a value per snap below expectation standpoint. Some of these guys were guys that got forced into playing and you didn't want them to play, like a Tyler Huntley, like a Jackson Carman, like a you could even put Emmanuel Agba on this list. Agba was not in the plans for Miami this year. And then you had a retirement in before training camp, on the eve of training camp, and you had to pivot and scramble to sign somebody. They signed for $4.47 million. So when you consider where the reinforcements are coming, safety, they totally remade the room. They've invested in replacements for both of the guards as underperforming players. Kader Kohou's a player whose developmental trend is at least trending upwards because he played well in the second half of the year. Walker's gone. They remade the linebacker room. I think you can look at, obviously, they remade the backup quarterback room. Durham Smythe's gone. David Long was gone midseason. Agba, you're getting Phillips and Chubb healthy again. They kind of push them off. So I can look at from Neil Farrell up to about David Long as it's the bottom 12 performing players on a per snap basis from a financial, when you weight it for financials. A lot of these guys are mitigated or replaced, right? And that goes by extension for guys like Skylar Thompson, who are just a little bit further up, but didn't play a ton of snaps and didn't get a ton of money, right? But that's where I think you can, it's not a surprise to take the inventory on what rooms did they remake to see where these grades are so poorly represented at guard, at safety, at backup quarterback, at linebacker, tight end, edge. You're getting guys healthy again. So this isn't obviously a be-all, end-all. I don't want it to be interpreted as a be-all, end-all. But the moves that they've made are at least in line with me for a lot of where you got poor bang for your buck and where you got negative contributions to the football team. Some of this is going to be dependent on, you're going to have to sign somebody and place another bet with a veteran free agent to replace what you're potentially going to lose in Jalen Ramsey when it's all said and done. But if I isolate that individual piece of data, I think you can justify why the Dolphins are on the precipice of doing what the Dolphins are on the precipice of doing. For Jalen Waddle, I think he, at a price point that's cheaper than Tyreek Hill, and I thought he played better last year than Tyreek Hill did. I'm glad that the bottom three players are replaced in the starting lineup. A lot of the depth players that got pushed into playing prominent roles, you've remade the entirety of the room. So, as the Dolphins move forward from here, there's a lot of variance. I think that's the word for me. As I try to put my thumb on like a central theme for what this year is really going to be a lot about. Variance is a word you're going to hear a lot because there's variance in the defensive tackle room. There's variance in the safety room. There's variance with quarterback play and how available to it is. There's variance with the interior offensive line because you've got a rookie penciled in to start one spot and you got somebody coming off an Achilles injury from early in the year in 2024. You've got variance in the edge group because how healthy, there's a lot of variance. There's a lot of things I don't have a lot of confidence in saying this is how it's going to turn out. But I can at least look at where they got their dollar value last year and say the things that were the biggest problems were addressed. The things that probably, when you consider how much dollars are being invested there and are not trending in the right direction, they're receptive to doing the smart business thing to do. And that's that watch is going to continue until Jalen Ramsey's off the team and the Dolphins pay Tyreek Hill his option bonus and get him locked in for the year. And hopefully he's in the lab the way that he says he is because he wasn't last year. And the variance, we'll take inventory throughout the year and find out what's falling on the head side of the coin and what's falling on the tail side of the coin because the Dolphins got a fair amount of each on last year's group too. And the variance that bit them was the variance for the names that was in-house who didn't give you the best versions of themselves, be that Bradley Chubb with rehab or Jalen Phillips with getting injured again or Tua Tagovailoa missing time with another concussion because he tried to run over Damar Hamlin and so on and so forth, right? So we'll see. But I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the financial aspects of last year's team, kind of where value for dollars existed. Hope that underscores some of the value of rookie contracts because if you get guys that are above expectation performers and they're playing on rookie deals, man, that value can be sweet. And that's the Dolphins got that with Devon Achane. They will probably get that with Devon Achane again this year. It's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys as always for checking the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins. I'll talk to you all again soon.